might start with Pat Smullen, which is kind of a sober note really to start on, Brian, but a lot of people were touched by last Tuesday evening when the news was breaking about Pat, and I was talking to a few people from Road who were getting ready to train for the weekend, because I'd heard through some journalist friends, in particular the Racing Post, were about to push that they got the news from Pat's family that he'd passed away. He had been low for a few months. Unfortunately, the side of this pancreatic cancer is we were all celebrating when he got the all clear just over a year ago. And then we had the cancer trials race and all the jubilation around that. He won the Cartier Award because of the $2.5 million that was raised in his name around that weekend at the Curragh. But then unfortunately a relapse happened, and pancreatic cancer is a particularly mean cancer, and it's one that can be aggressive and that can come back. And just very sad news that Pat passed away as quickly as he did after the relapse, because I think we were all hopeful that he was going to get a few more years with Frances, his wife, and with his very young family too.
Yeah, it's a devastating blow for the people of Offaly, because anyone that knows Pat Smullen knows how hard of a worker and a grafter he was, and I'd have a fair interest in horse racing, and he'd be definitely one of my idols going up. You know, you'd be going to Galway, and it's one of the greatest festivals ever, and both him and Dermot Well targeted Galway, and you know, any punter that was going to Galway in the last 20 years would depend on Pat Smullen and Dermot Well to give the bookies a bit of a scutcheon and fill their pockets for the week and try and last as many days as you can in Galway. He was a very, very hard grafter, as I said, worked tremendously hard with Dermot Well, was very loyal to both My Glare Stud and Aggie Khan, but a huge loss to his wife Frances and his 3 young children. I happened to be passing the house the other day, and just to see the cars there and the amount of people and the respect that Pat Smullen had, and it was all because of hard work. And you know, it touched on the memory for me too that one of our men, John Buckley, who had diagnosed, one man that he did ring for advice when he got cancer was Pat Smullen, and Pat gave him great advice to battle it hard and stay strong. Unfortunately, we lost John Buckley just before Christmas, and now we've lost Pat Smullen, but Pat was a huge, huge ambassador for Offaly, probably one of our greatest sports people ever in Offaly, and just an awful loss.
And I think, Brian, one of the things that summed up the measure of Pat was when you see the fellow professionals, and RT did a lovely tribute piece, and both the jockeys and the owner speaking about how much advice he gives. You know, he wasn't one to show about. He was a family man. He worked hard. Every year he was in it as a jockey from young fella up. The ultimate professional seems to be coming out. You know, that Pat got to where he was through work. And even it's just the nice guy off the field. You know, we're here the other week with Road playing in the county semi-final, and the minute silence was impeccably deserved, because, you know, Road GA was a huge, huge love of Pat's as well. Like Shane Lowry in the golf, these are international sports stars, but they come back to their club and give so much. And I think there was genuine emotion here with the few in attendance in terms of how well renowned Pat was got in his own village.
Yeah, well, each town, lucky enough, every so often has a sports personality that comes along. We in Clara are lucky to have Shane Lowry. Road are very steep to have Pat Smullen, but to look at Twitter last Tuesday night and see the comments was like to be tears in your eyes actually reading down through the comments about Pat Smullen and young Andy Slattery, for example, who he gave advice to, one of the upcoming jockeys as well, you know, paid a fine tribute to the way. And even you see racing in Australia over the weekend, you know, leaving messages and well wishes for Pat Smullen, and even on the race card, you know, thanking Pat Smullen for the years of service and the ambassador he was for racing. And you know, one would feel even for himself, he was a little bit greedy, and we all get caught up in bubbles, and he touched on it himself. Like, you get, when you're in sport or in a high level of anything, you get nearly distracted with your own importance, and he mentioned that's how genuine it was when he got cancer, that he could go back and have that time with his family, them couple of years that probably he didn't have because he was so professional and so determined to get to the top of his game. But it's a very, very sad day for everyone in Road in particular, and his family indeed. But I thought he was definitely one of the greatest people I've ever seen in a professional sport, and that's the tribute we can pay to him here this evening.
Yeah, I mean, huge achievements for Pat Smullen. 9-time champion jockey, 2016 probably the apex of his career, with Harzand winning the Irish Derby on either side of the Irish Sea. But a litany of classic winners along the way. A tremendous record, as Brian mentioned, not just at Galway, and he had a great record at Dundalk, when you consider the far less glamorous tracks that you might go to on a Friday night. But also Pat Smullen was a darling of Royal Ascot. And one of the things that I found, Brian, that was very tricky about all this when he picked up the first cancer diagnosis in March or April of 2018 was that Pat was coming off the back of some of the best form of his career. 2015 and 16 have been two of the best years in terms of Group 1 success. This was a guy who had just turned 40 really and was at the very top of his game.
Yeah, well, you see Frankie Dettori now, who's close to 50, if not 50, and he's still riding on the crest of a wave. One would imagine Pat Smullen had at least another 7 or 8 years at the top of his game. As you said, he was hitting the highlight. You'd have to admire the man for how loyal he was to Dermot Well. I'm sure there would have been conversations with Aidan O'Brien, I'd say.
With family connections especially, Brian, it would have been a very easy move at different times. I'd say particularly when, Donncha was deciding to go in a different direction, and there had to be various different points where I'm sure that conversation probably happened at a Christmas dinner or maybe around Stephen's time when the families got together. Yeah,
I'm sure in years to come we'll find out, but it just showed that Dermot Well gave him his big chance, and he stood very loyal to Dermot Well. And he was freelancing as well with other trainers, and he had very good records with other trainers as well. But when he got on the saddle, he was trying, and if a trainer rang him and his agent Gavin, the horse would be trying, no matter what Pat Smullen was riding. He didn't want to ride a horse that was out for a gallop or out the back just to get the handicap mark down. When Pat Smullen and Kevin O'Ryan, I'd say, got them phone calls, it was like A.P. Mackay. He was driven to do his best and try and achieve the best, and that was the testament to the man that he was.
Yeah, I think a big part of it as well, Joe, people remember what happened off the track with Pat Smullen. Racing people and people who were interested in the horse racing would have known about Pat and his tremendous record and his great drive to succeed. But a lot of people probably got to know him through the fundraising efforts that happened over the last couple of years, where people maybe saw the human side of a man that I've known for about 10 years and was always just a soft-spoken gentleman. That came across, and you see all the jockeys that came back in September of 2019 to ride in that Cancer Trials Day at the Curragh, which is more of a celebration rather than a sad day, really. But the fact that they were willing to do that, and the fact that people were willing to put their hand in their pocket and hand over $2 million towards cancer research is probably the greatest mark of Pat Smullen that goes way beyond his record on the track. Yeah, and it's something maybe that irks me, and I suppose I get yourself and Brian's feeling on it as well, is we don't maybe tell people enough when they're alive what they mean to those around them and what they've done. And you rightly said it was a celebration that day, because you see that tribute on Twitter the other day of how emotional he was with A.P. Mackay winning the race, that A.P. Mackay swore he'd never ride again, came down, tried his all to win that race, even though it was essentially a novelty race. But the money, the emotion in Pat for what he had done for the cancer trials was huge. You could see it in him. He was shook, but he was strong. He had obviously at that stage, he was deep into his treatment. He thought he was getting over the worst of it. You could see the emotion in his face, what it meant to him, what it meant to his family. And I think it's something, particularly in sport, because sports stars are so well connected with the general public from an exterior, that maybe we don't actually tell these people how much they're impressing on our lives while they're alive. And it's probably a big thing for Pat and his family. The family can now look back and say, he's done this, he's got his appreciation, people will always remember him, people got to see the human side of him, because as Brian said, they're living in a bubble. You can talk about all the top sportsmen, be it jockeys, be it boxers, be it golfers, unless you're in and involved with them, you only see the exterior. There's a human side there, there's a human story. And much like we'll speak about later on, Shane Lowry in the golf, when the documentary came back after him winning the Open, and it showed Brendan in the kitchen having to get up and cry, because that's his son out there. He knows, like Shane's close friends, what he's gone through. And I think for Pat to see that and see what he gave people, and along with the fantastic money that was raised, gave him a fitting tribute, unfortunately before his timely end, but fantastic to see. And a legacy lives on, and nowadays with social media and all these platforms we have, it's great to be able to look back, and it'll be great for his kids in time to be able to see their father at his best. Dermot Wells, as I said, refused to bend. Name one of the famous horses that Pat Smullen won on. Said that was really the feeling about Pat Smullen over the last couple of years. We'll just take a very short video here. This is a tribute that was put up before the Cartier Awards earlier this year, where a lot of Pat's fellow jockeys were paying tribute, and maybe it's just a mark of the respect with which Pat Smullen was held in.
One of the nurses at the hospital said to me, you should do something about raising awareness of pancreatic cancer. Everybody put their heads together and we came up with what we came up with.
It's not for me to beat AP or Paul or Charlie or to have one more ride. It's for pancreatic cancer, it's for the research. But for me, it's for Pat Smullen.
To get that lineup of jockeys, nobody said no, they all just said yes straight away.
It's something that I feel very proud to be involved in, and I think Pat should be very proud to have organised it all, and hopefully we'll make it a success for him.
A.P. Mackay swore he'd never ride again, came back for Pat Smullen.
That was a special weekend.
It was a miserable day weather-wise, but 10,000 or more people turned out for that day.
I don't think we will ever see an atmosphere at the Curragh ever again like that.
They came to say thank you for a wonderful career that he'd had in the saddle.
To see the competitive juices starting to flow within them all again was something quite amazing. It was actually quite amusing to watch. I'd never seen it before, to be honest, that they were running from the stands to get down to the paddock to see him come back into the winner's enclosure, and that was something very, very special. It was a great spectacle.
It was so well attended, it was such a feel. Would have been good just to beat him one more time.
We're after raising an enormous amount of money that will make a huge difference going forward, and it gives people confidence to keep going forward, as it does to me. But what a privilege to be involved in what a great industry.
I've been involved in the past with trying to raise money, and you raise 20, 30,000 and you think you've done something fantastic, and then you see somebody whose story encourages people to contribute into millions.
There was a testimony to what people thought of Pat Smullen and the way that he's prepared to take on and fight against cancer.
There is nobody more deserving of the award than Pat Smullen this year.
He's been 9 times champion jockey riding for me. His work ethic has been huge, and his total involvement here has been very much appreciated.
He gave it all in every way, and that's the way he is as a human being.
So I owe Pat Smullen a lot. He set me up in business, we became great friends, and even got me a wife out of it.
If you got a young jockey in and you said, just be like Pat Smullen, you wouldn't have to tell them anything else.
What more can you ask for somebody to be the one that everybody should aspire to be like?
He's the professional's professional.
I'd like to think that throughout the 25 years that I was a jockey, that I conducted myself in a proper manner, and I think that's something to be proud of.